Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 12 of Wilbur Talks FPL, where we talk everything, of course, as in the title, FPL and the Premier League in general. We are back during the international break for a second podcast, which we've kind of just about survived through this international break, and we're happy to have FPL back. I'm sure a lot of people will also agree with that. And we're coming to a period of 10 game weeks in 40 days, so sounds perfect to get us recovering from this international break. So joining us again today, we've got Charlie. How are you doing today, Charlie?
Yeah, well, good, thank you. Happy to be back. Like you say, it does drag a little bit international break, even regardless of FPL. I'm just happy club football's coming back. And yeah, looking forward to a hectic schedule of lots of Premier League football to watch every day.
Yeah, it definitely just hits different, doesn't it? Club football. I feel like international football, unless it's like a big tournament, there's not like the same kind of hype around it. Especially when you've got like San Marino or someone. It's a bit different.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, playing the likes of Albania and San Marino, it's not exactly the stuff that the equivalent of the Monday Night Football gang put up with. So yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's game week 14. I mentioned the other day on Discord as well that we literally have Premier League football both weekends, and then we have it on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday as well. It's just like a dream. And FPL is back with a bang.
And it does help you if you have a bad week, because then you're quickly able to focus on the next one.
Yeah, you don't have to dwell over Havertz captaincy instead of a Salah one like that week. But
Wouldn't know. I didn't captain Havertz.
plenty of time. But we'll get into that. Unfortunately, we're a two-man band this evening as Sam has not returned from international duty, but I'm sure he'll be returning on the next one. So you'll have to put up with both of us just for tonight, but we'll still enjoy it. And we kind of saw, we talked about Sam's kind of ideas for his team on the last pod anyway, so that was good that we got that coverage in there. So to start the pod this week, we're going to kind of talk about some key selection dilemmas, as I would call them, what we've got coming up for obviously this game week coming up, but then looking forward a few game weeks, especially the first kind of topic we're going to touch on. So to start with, we're going to talk a bit about Spurs. I think we've kind of touched on San Marino there. There's been a lot of hype around Kane after getting so many goals against some minnows, should we say, and not having a lot of form for Spurs. And I think there's a bit of the should you go Kane or Son, and it can often depend on your team structure. But what do you think, Charlie? Would you say it's right to be going for Spurs now, or would you kind of wait and see till they play a few of these easier fixtures, as we're saying they're easier, of course. It might not turn out to be as easy as you'd think. Would you be jumping on them now or wait and see?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think if the fixtures weren't as they were, then it would be an easy wait and see. Because it does feel too soon to jump on players based off effectively whatever it is, two games in total in all competitions that Conte's been in charge. So and that was a midweek and then a weekend game. So he's barely had any time to really work with them. And then obviously they've all pretty much gone off on international duty. So it feels like it's still going to be a while, but before we see any really in the mold of Conte's vision. I think just the fact that a new manager has come in and will invigorate the players, as it does tend to most clubs when they get a new manager, the so-called new manager bounce. But yeah, I guess it just kind of feels really team dependent. I think if you've not got any other obvious transfer to make, then I guess it's not the worst gamble in the world because of those fixtures, because it's Leeds, Burnley, Brentford, Norwich the next four. You'd expect even a team out of form to be able to get something from those with the quality they have. You did allude obviously to the fact that Kane's there's kind of been two narratives. One, that Kane, he's obviously been away with England playing these really rubbish teams, and also has been in an England side that has so much quality in it to be able to create for him. That doesn't necessarily translate. And then there's also this other narrative that actually, okay, whilst that might be true, as a striker, he's scored however many goals it is, 4 in one game, was it 3 in the other? And strikers do tend to work on confidence, and so that can still help him. I'm still not convinced. I think if we forget about anything that happened this international break, I would before this international break, I still would have chosen Son over Kane, just because the whole season Son still looked like he can do something, and he's scored I think 4 goals compared to Kane's 1, in terms of in the league anyway. So I think of the two, I would still be looking at Son. I know, and obviously there's the price difference to think about as well. There's about 2 million in price difference, and I think in my mind, there's no way Kane justifies that over Son. So I think I would only consider Kane over Son based on team setup, and if it's like an obvious striker, if you've still got someone like maybe Ronaldo's actually a bad example because of the run Man United are about to go on, but someone close to that level, then it makes a more obvious swap. But of the two, I think I'd go Son. But to answer your actual question about whether you would jump on immediately, I think it's a gamble worth looking at, but not a definite one. I've talked around that and sat on the fence, haven't I? But I can see that. I can see the benefit of both, and it's not it's not an outrageous move, and it's one that a lot of people are making. So there's certainly things to back it up.
Yeah, you kind of jumped off the fence and then jumped back on it just at the end, didn't you? Just to go all the way back around. But yeah, I think I definitely agree with what you're saying of favouring Son. Well, I'm going to say that as well because Son is already in my team. I brought him in last week in preparation for this kind of run. Well, it didn't go as planned, but I thought I could get something against Everton as well because Everton weren't great defensively, but then it was typically a 0-0, and I don't think Spurs even had a shot. So I'd definitely be saying Son is the better option. I think the only argument, obviously, we've kind of talked about team structure, and if there's an easier route for you to get to Kane, that makes sense. But I'd also make the argument as well, you might want to go to Kane so it gives you that possibility to be able to switch to Ronaldo down the line, because if you're going to keep transferring funds between midfield and striking department, then you're going to be losing a lot of transfers to do that. So especially, I think they're quite easy swap. If you brought Kane in for the next 4 game weeks, you could easily swap straight to Ronaldo, and it saves you having to move funds around, which is also supported by, I'd say, there's a lot better value in midfield currently, and there's a lot more value options you could get there. Not really any strikers are firing at this point in time, so I think there's more competition in that slot where Son will be rather than where Kane would be. So I'm not fully put off getting Kane. I think it's kind of inevitable that he was going to score quite a few in the international break, just because it had to put it in our head, didn't it, really, coming into this next set of fixtures. But I've positioned my team, but I'll talk about it a bit later on, that obviously I have Son, and if I feel that we're going to see something magnificent, like unbelievable from Spurs, like we saw at the start of last season, there is possibility to get Kane in, but obviously I've got a lot of flexibility with that amount of funds for a Kane, where we could go elsewhere to maybe some other options, like from different teams that we'll talk about. Outside of those two for Spurs, would you be going anywhere in terms of Spurs? Would you be going for a fullback, Charlie, if you was going to go for anyone?
Definitely not at the moment. That's an 100% wait and see for me. I think, obviously there was that, was it the Europa Conference League where they went 3-0 up and then drew 3-3 or something like that, where they conceded a lot of goals or something like that. But yeah, that they've, even in Conte's system, even if he starts getting them play the way he wants them, they're still the players that they are, and it feels like that impacts the defense more than it does impacts the attack. And also they've got world class players up front, whereas I can't think of a world class player they've got midfield or behind. So it's definitely a wait and see. I think, like you mentioned, the fullbacks, or I guess wingbacks as they're going to be, will have the potential to be enticing. People, I can't remember whether this the beginning of this season or maybe last season, did look at Reguilon. I think he's another one that's kind of like a bit like Luke Shaw has been, where he gets some of the right stats in terms of putting balls in, but tends to actually not create real quality chances. So it's kind of just based on sheer volume rather than quality, which has the benefit of, when you've got finishes as good as Kane and Son can be, that's no bad thing, because they're likely to turn sort of bad chances into good ones. So yeah, certainly the wing backs would be in my wider sort of periphery, but no way, no chance I'm going near them early on, because I just have no confidence, even with the fixture run they've got, that they would keep clean sheets as a minimum. If we start seeing sort of regular attacking returns, then of course that's when we can start considering them. But I don't think there's any need to jump to them, particularly because of how strong, the other options are in defence at the moment with, the Man City, Chelsea, and Liverpool defence. There's no need to jump off those to get into a sort of try your luck with something that's not necessarily going to come off.
Definitely agree with that thinking. I think it's the fact that we're not sure how solid they'll be defensively. So when you go in for like a more premium defender like a Trent or a Cancelo, you've got the attacking potential and you've got the pretty, well, not guaranteed clean sheet, but you've got a high chance of a clean sheet, so you've got that double threat kind of thing there. So until we see a bit more stability from Spurs, then we probably could go for them, and then obviously get a bit of benefit from the attacking returns. I think, like you said, Reguilon did look decent at times last season, so we'll see how he works in that wing-back role. But if we move on to one of the other teams and kind of dilemmas, well, competing up at that kind of same level, well, I say same level, Spurs aren't even that high in the table, but if we switch the focus over to Liverpool, I feel like we're getting this same kind of dilemma we had very early in the season when Firmino is out, and there's a chance that Robertson may also be out. So there might be a kind of a decision on his Liverpool assets to potentially get Jota or Tsimikas as a third Liverpool option. Obviously, I can see a lot of. Well, we've got confirmed news that Firmino is out basically till mid-December, so that is about roughly 5 game weeks that we can kind of assume Jota will get a lot of game time, which makes him obviously more appealing because, well, even when he's on the pitch, he can get, even if he comes on for 30 minutes, he can get a return, but that kind of, you'd expect guaranteed start time, makes him even more of an option. Would you be considering Jota based on that news on Firmino, Charlie?
Yeah, I'm definitely considering both of those two you mentioned. I think, again, the fact that kind of defense is so set at the moment in terms of the players that are consistently producing it does feel a bit tougher to think about bringing Tsimikas in. And you'd probably also say that's more of a defined endpoint where once Robertson comes in back properly, like we saw earlier this season, he would come back into the team. Although we could say during sort of the Christmas periods, Tsimikas may well get a couple of starts anyway, even with Robertson fit and firing. With Jota, I think it ties up quite nicely because, maybe by the time Mane comes back, that's, again, same argument about the sort of Christmas period and rotation anyway, so he's likely to get game time where he might not have otherwise. But then also we then get into sort of AFCON time anyway, and he obviously has a great almost definite chance of starting those games because of the other players that are going away. So I think of the two, I'd definitely eyeing up Jota, and particularly I think with the fixtures as well, I just do favour those as attacking fixtures as opposed to defensive ones. Liverpool haven't been completely solid, certainly not compared to the likes of Chelsea and Man City, and I always back them to score. And particularly, so for example, in my own team, I've got Rafinha, who once he gets into game week 16, I think it is, he's got Chelsea, Man City, Arsenal, and Liverpool in a row. That seems like a perfect point for me to jump over to Jota for that's a million difference. But I guess by doing that, you might be missing out on him a little bit early. But I think Jota's a great option. We've always seen whenever he gets regular game time, he does well, particularly in that Liverpool team, who I think I'm still correct in that they're the best attacking team in the league statistically, ahead of Man City. So any player that you can get into that starting 11 is going to do well. So yeah, definitely in my thoughts. But again, another one that I'm going to sound quite boring, but just another one that I'm not going to jump on straight away. Just keep an eye on. But yeah, looks really good option.
Yeah, I'm definitely eyeing him up, especially from next week. Giving your own side a bit of credit, the fact that they're playing Arsenal this week is, well, it's not put me off, but I kind of had a set plan that I wanted to do this week anyway. But eyeing him up, I think, well, I know I've got a watch list of Kane, Jota. I'm trying to think who the third person was. It's kind of like a Callum Wilson. I've got a kind of as I've mentioned on previous pods, I've still got my wildcard in hand. So between now and I think I'm aiming for game week 16 now, probably going to wildcard because it falls quite. One of the points that I was doing 16 was for that Rafinha run as well, because I'd highlighted that Rafinha will fit well up to game week 15 and then he can go out in 16, and it kind of matches the Spurs end of their run and the start of Man United's run, but I'm not completely sold on the Man United yet. So I'm hoping, especially like a Wilson, I might be able to take the punts on those kind of players and they'll just be wildcarded out a few weeks later. But like you said with Jota, I think if you didn't have that AFCON, you'd probably be you'd be doing it as a short-term move to like the middle of December and then be getting rid of him anyway. But the fact they've got that as well, it's a good point that if you get him now, he could be a long-term option to be holding for a good like 15 game weeks kind of thing. So it's definitely a very appealing option at the minute, I'm not going to lie. And I think the key with Liverpool, as you mentioned, they're the best attacking side. Basically, everyone in the game will be captaining Salah, so you don't get really much benefit from that. Not most people, but quite a lot of people have Trent who can get that attacking potential. But if you're going to actually get a rank increase from that Liverpool attack, you probably need a Jota or Mane to give you that impact, because you're not getting much of a rank increase without having that in there. So it's very much jumped up that watch list after that confirmed news. And then on Tsimikas, I think we just need confirmed news about Robertson. But again, yeah, I get what you mean. It's not it's kind of not. Obviously, you said about the defence. It's kind of one of those transfers you don't really want to make because you know you're gonna have to get rid of him, and it's just not. It's a bit of a boring transfer, isn't it? When I'm saying I'm going to take punts in the next few weeks, I don't think Tsimikas is particularly high up there of the punt. But saying that, I was looking at my team earlier and I was like, I've got a Marty who's exactly the same price who barely plays for Leicester. So I was like, I could easily make that change, but it's just not a sexy pick, is it really?
Well, you say that, but he did do quite well attacking wise, sort of early in the season anyway. And I think particularly someone in your position where it's not one of those kind of obvious set defense. So, for example, in my team, I think I've pretty got the template defense of Trent, Cancelo, Diaz, Reece James, and then Livramento. So I can't see myself transferring out any of those for Tsimikas. Maybe Diaz at a stretch, but I've actually kind of changed my mind on Diaz and think I'll keep him. Whereas, if you've got someone the likes of Amati, then it does start to make it more of an option in terms of an improvement in that position. But again, like you say, it's a booking yourself a transfer in probably at a time when you don't really want to be booking yourself a transfer in this sort of December run of fixtures. So a couple of things to think about. But I don't necessarily think he's a sort of unsexy pick because he does have that attacking potential as well, seemingly as much as Robertson does when he's in that side as well.
Yeah, I think it's just I'm going to try and attack the next few game weeks, and he's probably not on that kind of list of me as an attacking choice, but you never know. And I feel I don't particularly need to change my defence. I've missed the boat with the Chelsea fullbacks. I'm not going to go there now because I feel like that run they had is now gone, and I don't trust Chelsea that well defensively. I know they'll get their attacking returns as fullbacks, but I'm not convinced about the Chelsea defence. So I've missed that boat, so I'm not going to be going there. And somehow Semedo's still in my team. But I've got to the point where I'm like, he's in my team. And then I looked at the fixtures, and after this week, they've got like Norwich and Burnley. I'm like, well, if he's come this far, I may as well give him that chance. And then they'll be gone on the wild card anyway. So, and it also, obviously, we mentioned, I think, when on the last pod about benching headaches and losing points on the bench. At the minute, my bench is terrible, so it's not giving me any headaches. And I can get that sorted ready for December because I think last week my bench was Brownhill, Amati, and Semedo. Like, that doesn't cause me any issues when it comes to selection, really. I might have one player that's an issue when Semedo's got some good fixtures, but I think it's not the ideal situation if you're going into the Christmas period with that, but with the fact the wildcard's there, obviously I can remedy that when we get closer to that point. But yeah, so I just wanted to, I think when we recorded last time, we had Eddie Howe in place, didn't we? But we didn't have news of Gerrard to Villa and Dean Smith to Norwich. I just wanted to talk about that a bit. I know there's been a lot of mention about the style that Gerrard would play. Firstly, Charlie, what do you make of those two appointments at those two clubs?
Yeah, it's very weird, particularly for them to all kind of happen at the same time. It feels a bit much to get your head around, particularly for FPLs wise. I think it's certainly a wait and see on both of those. I don't think anyone's going near those teams anyway. I think the Gerrard one kind of makes sense. I think that's the right level for him to be coming into the Premier League at. There's been talks about him potentially succeeding Klopp eventually, and that feels way too big a job at this moment in time. So if he can do well with this Aston Villa side, and there's no reason he can't because of the quality in that side. Obviously, to this point, they've just not clicked, and they're massively underperforming. But that's actually probably a good thing for a new manager to come into because, like we talked about before, there's the potential for this sort of new manager bounce. All the players want to impress the manager, and I think particularly someone like Gerrard, all of those players are going to be well aware. It's recent enough his playing career; they're going to be well aware of his playing career, and they're going to be well aware of that as well, what he's done with Rangers and how impressive that was. So I think those players really will turn it around for him. And he seems to be a really good, from what everyone says, seems to be a really good man manager. So I think that's a good sort of good a good hire for them. It does feel a bit harsh on Dean Smith, following the sale of their best player, who arguably maybe the team wasn't deliberately built around, but just ended up being built around, just through him being the best player in that team and everything going through him, which had an impact both on the attack and the defense. So it did feel a bit harsh on him, but yeah, it's one of those weird ones where he ends up getting a job within a week, and moving straight to another Premier League side. And I can't think of any time in recent memory where something like that has happened. I'm interested to see how that how that move goes. Um, Any manager choosing or kind of agreeing to go to a side that's bottom of the league has looked like they're pretty much relegation confirmed. It does interest me. I do wonder if, because of Dean Smith having been able to bring Villa up, whether that's more of a long term plan. And I think I spoke last week about when Norwich, kind of the talk coming out of Norwich in terms of who they were looking for in their managers. It wasn't going to be the likes of Sam Allardyce or kind of a specialist in sort of staying up. It was going to be someone that suits their philosophy. And I think that's probably what this kind of highlights. And so it's good to see they've got a sort of clear plan, and they're seemingly following through with it. So I don't necessarily see that changing much in terms of Norwich's outlook on the season. I feel like they're kind of, as a club, they're prepared that they are potentially still just going down, but they've got a manager in that's going to help them when they do go down to probably come back up. So yeah, I don't think it necessarily changes anything for them. I think it's a very good hire for Norwich. And yeah, it'd just be interesting to see. Any time these sort of new managers and new styles come into the league, it's always interesting just to see how that plays out. But I think, yeah, particularly the Gerrard one does interest me because I think ultimately he has ambitions of, like I said, probably ending up at Liverpool. So this could be that stepping stone that he needs if he does really well.
Yeah, it's definitely the kind of step you need. It's not like what happened with Lampard, where it just looked like a big leap into Chelsea, and it was a bit too early to be doing that kind of thing. So I agree with you that it's the right kind of step he needs to be taking. I also agree on your point about Dean Smith. I think it was quite harsh, slightly harsh, after what he'd done for them as well to get him into that position. And like you said, selling the best player can't be the worst bit. And it's clear to see that he's not a bad manager. The fact he's got a new job within like a few days, so there's demand for him out there. So it's not like you're an Ollie and you get sacked and you're not going to have a job waiting for you anyway. But yeah, it's slightly harsh. I just wanted to touch on, we mentioned that Newcastle's new manager, and I kind of just talked about the faults of a Callum Wilson in the team. I don't think I'd ever go for a Newcastle defender, but the Newcastle front line, obviously mainly Wilson that I'd be saying, think for the next few game weeks, it's a decent one to be going for, especially like in my position, get him in for 3 or 4 weeks and get him out. Would you? Well, I think it's also because there's not many options up front that are really exciting at the minute. Would you say Wilson would be like a decent player to be going for up front at the minute, Charlie?
I think you kind of expressed my thoughts in
Yeah.
your questions. It does feel like a more obvious move for someone in your position with a wild card because of that turn of fixtures by game week 16, where it really starts to turn bad for Newcastle. They have Leicester, Liverpool, Man City, Man United in a row. But as you say, they do have a good fixture run now. They've got Brentford, Arsenal, Norwich, Burnley. So it's an obvious move for someone that is attacking that short-term weeks. I think Wilson of anyone would be the only one that I would go to in the Newcastle team. That being, and I completely back him to probably score at least 3 goals in the next 4 games. The problem that's in the back of my mind is that, but because this is something I'm considering, because I've got Vardy and I'm considering whether to downgrade and who to downgrade to, and every time I think about that, I also think, well, if there's not really any other good equivalents in the striking positions, but if we think about defensive positions at similar prices, and I know it's not all completely, it doesn't transfer completely because there are players at different prices and so on. But I would take any of those premium defenders who ultimately, other than Trent, would be cheaper than Wilson. I would take any of those premiums ahead of him, and I would feel more confident about them returning each week than him. So that does keep factoring into my mind that ultimately at this point I've got Antonio, and I can't think of another striker that I would want, ahead of any of those other premium players in medium or in midfield or defence. So yeah, it's a tough one. I think I can't see myself doing that move, most kind of because of all those reasons piled in together. I think because I've not got my wildcard anymore, it feels too short term a move. Like I said, I don't really want to book in transfers as we move into December, and ultimately that is going to be a transfer if you've not got your wildcard, because you can't really just keep him in the team for those basically 4 games in a row where you wouldn't expect a goal from him. But again, maybe that's just me being too safe. Maybe if you do want to try and push on and sort of attack those weeks, then maybe that is someone to look at. But again, I would just think about the potential opportunities in other positions for a similar price that you could get better returns out of. Yeah, so we'll see. And I, as I say, I do think he will do okay in the next 4, but I just can't see myself doing it just on free transfers alone.
Yeah. Well, I think what you've said is kind of encourages me more to do it, because a lot of people will be in your situation, and that's where I would hope to get some kind of advantage from doing it. Kind of the provisional plan I've got would actually just to bring him for 2 weeks. I think leave it this week and next week, and then he's playing. I think it's Norwich and Burnley. I know it's definitely Norwich. It might not be Burnley the second one, but utilize those 2 fixtures. Which obviously, well, we could see how Norwich before they might get slightly better defensively, but at the minute, obviously, you always try to target like a Norwich or a Watford. So that is a provisional plan, but like I said, it's subject to change. And obviously, in your situation, we've kind of discussed Jota just before. I'd say like Jota is obviously a more viable long-term option because of those points we've discussed. And I like the point you made about obviously you need to think what the value is in each position. Because I think we get caught up, especially in midfielders. You need to make sure you couldn't get better value elsewhere by just like getting a Chelsea fullback or something who is probably quite a bit cheaper. Because I think there's kind of, well, maybe not as much this year because there's quite a few value midfielders, but you can kind of sometimes get caught up on like an 8 million midfielder when you could actually use that to get like 2 premium defenders. So that's a good point you made about that.
I was just going to say, we do have to, I think, particularly people that have been playing this game for a while, do have to kind of re-educate ourselves about it, because there's just kind of been this tradition of playing 3 at the back, and that's kind of how most people have played it for a long time. But and it's been a long time coming. I think the earliest I remember was Alonso when he first came in for Chelsea and was doing really well as a wing back. It just feels like, yeah, we've and I keep trying to say it to myself, but I think I still just forget and fall into the old thing of it just feels right when you're playing a 3-4-3, even though actually, based on the league and the players as they are now, that's probably not the best value points wise. So yeah, I think we do need to start thinking of, a back four as a more regular formation and possibly even the go-to based on how things are currently. But that being said, there's in FPL everything changes so quick. At the beginning of the season or in the first couple of weeks, we were all clamoring to get Lukaku or Ronaldo in, and now no one wants to touch premium strikers. Maybe Kane coming back in now and Ronaldo's fixed run changes things again. So things can change quite quickly, but it does feel like over the last couple of years there's been the shift to, because of these wing backs that do so well both attacking and defensively, that we just need to rethink sort of what we see as the norm going forwards.
Not checked this, but I can imagine if you looked at the high scoring team in a formation, it wouldn't surprise me if it was close to like a 4-5-1 or a 5-4-1. It wouldn't be. Well, it definitely wouldn't be free up front. I think Antonio and Vardy might turn it into a 4-4-2, but it wouldn't be that far away from having a lot of defenders in there. So yeah, definitely. Especially I think especially the strikers at the minute, there seems to be no one firing at all. I think the last 3 or 4 weeks we've not seen many goals at all. I think, like, looking back at last week, I can think of Pookie. I can't remember many other strikers who actually returned outside of him. So there's not a lot of going on there, but obviously at some stage they will hit a hot streak, and that's hopefully what some of us will catch. Hopefully that's what Wilson will do if I bring him in. But we shall see. I just wanted to touch on one more point, and it kind of is following on for something you mentioned earlier that you've got. Well, I was looking at your team earlier as well, and I saw that you had Triple City. Are you happy having Triple City going into December based on the rotation you normally see from them? And, well, obviously in defence it's quite a lot of money to have because you've got Diaz and Cancelo. Are you comfortable going into that period with all of those free in there?
So, firstly, I think, and this is completely off sort of no real statistical backing that I can think of, but I feel like Man City this season have been much more predictable in terms of their starting lineup and have rotated a lot less than we've normally actually seen in certain key areas. I think it's inevitable that you're going to get some rotation regardless of who the team is over December. Not as much, I think, like you made a point last week about, it maybe gets overhyped in terms of the amount of rotation that we see. I think in certain key positions, we don't actually tend to see that much rotation. I've picked the players that I have from Man City because those are the ones that I think, A, have the best potential, but also who I think are kind of the most set to play. And I'm perfectly fine with them missing the odd game as, at the same rate that any other players for any other team would do. So I think Foden by far is, in my opinion, the best regular starter in terms of both price and points. I think KDB clearly is also kind of equivalent in terms of starts and importance to the team. But obviously there's that big price difference. You touched on the defence, and this kind of speaks back to my point about the kind of re-educating it and going back to a back four at least, because I've got sort of 4 premiums and Livramento. I'm quite happy with it. A couple of weeks ago, I was thinking, and still kind of think about the potential to move Diaz out, and that's only really on the basis that he's not kind of the sort of the sexy pick of the team, because he's basically like a 6 points or a 2-point player. But it's Man City, and more times than not, it's going to be 6 points rather than 2. And I do seem to remember a lot of this doesn't necessarily apply to December, but because we're going to be seeing sort of regular, weekend and then midweek games, I just seem to remember in lots of past double game weeks, which obviously these aren't going to be double game weeks, but in terms of the actual spacing of the games are the equivalent of, it does tend to be the centre backs or defensive players that that actually do quite well because they tend to get both games. And I think Diaz is so important to that team. We've seen Stones and Laporte chop and change, and it tends to be one of those with Diaz. Now, I think Diaz has had one benching so far this season, which I fell foul of. But ultimately, he is their leading defender, and I feel confident in him getting, the equivalent of maybe 4 out of 5 games across a December period, or whatever, however many games it is. I can see him missing maybe 1 or 2, but no more than another potential defender might get for another team. And then there's Cancelo, who I think it kind of just blows all arguments out of water because of the points potentially he has. And again, even if he does miss fixtures, which I've highlighted before, I think because of his ability on both sides of the pitch, because he can play in both sides, and I think he's the best player they've got in both of those positions, both left back and right back. I think the potential for him to get rotated is much less than we maybe think of in terms of a Man City player. And his points potential is so great that even if he does get benched, does it matter? Because I've probably had a double-digit return from him the week before. So yeah, ultimately I'm quite happy to keep running with those. They've got a good run of fixtures in that period. So yeah, I've got no real doubts to be getting rid of them. The only thing that will make me sort of think about it again, particularly in terms of the double up in Man City defence, is if we do start seeing a bit of a shift to maybe like a premium forward. If Kane or Son or Ronaldo starts really going off, then that's probably going to be something I need to think about just in terms of how I get the funds to where I need to. But even so, because of the good value midfielders that we've got and the lack of other forwards, sort of the cheaper forwards, I should still be able to do that without having to take out the defence, because really at the moment we're just all running with Salah as the only real premium. If we take Trent out the equation, Salah is the only real premium player we've got. And usually by most sort of team structures you can fit in 2, 3 at a push, but it's not great. So yeah, but in long story short, I've got no issue with keeping my Man City players. I'm quite happy going in tripled up, and I think they'll do well.
Yeah, I think you could make the argument at the back now that Diaz is more likely to be dropped than Cancelo. I think you could make that argument because Cancelo's importance to the team at this point in time. And I think you will see a game or 2 during December where it'll be Laporte and Stones. So I probably agree with you. Like in a 5 kind of game period, he'll probably get 4 games still. But I think even the average with Cancelo will be the same as well. Like they're all likely to miss 1 or maybe even 2 fixtures over that period. But I think they're the 2 most important defenders, so they will get like 80-90% of the games. So I don't disagree on the defence. Foden's a funny one for me. I think Foden does flies to deceive a bit. I'm not sold on him at all. Like his best return was very lucky as well, so I'm not overly concerned about people having Foden in there and me not having Foden. I was looking at some stats earlier in the week as well, and actually Gundogan is matching his underlying stats. He's not got the same goal and assist return, but surprisingly Gundogan's stats were decent. And obviously we've got Bernardo Silva who's got more points than Foden. So I think at the minute, like everyone's sold on Foden, but I'm not completely sold on him. So I'll be avoiding Foden for some time, I think. I might get changed between now and my wildcard, but he's not going near my team until that point. I'm just not overly convinced by him. Saying that, he's done well in Champions League for me on my fantasy team there, but he's not been in my FPL team yet. So I think that kind of talks about the conundrums we had with team selection. And as we've not got Sam on, I'm still going to test your brain with 2 questions here, Charlie, because I feel like you need to just keep your brain going.
Yeah, keep me warm.
Yeah. So the idea for the quiz was going to be that I'm going to give you the name of 5 players and you have to put them in the right order of the amount of points they've scored so far this season.
Okay.
And you would have got points, but I'm not going to score you like we would have done before. So if I give you
play for pride.
Yeah, I'll do 2 of them for you. So if I give you these 5 player names, you need to put them in order of the amount of points they've got so far this season. So we're going to start with midfielders. So I'm going to give you Jota, Foden, Smith Rowe, Sarr, and Trossard. So I want you to order them from highest to lowest.
Okay, so Jota, Foden, Smith Rowe, Sarr, and who was the other one? Trossard.
Trossard, yeah.
Okay. I hope it's not going to be my bias, but I'm pretty sure Smith Rowe is top of that list. Who would be second?
Do you want me to take the answer as first? I can tell you who's first.
Smith Rowe's first, yeah.
Yeah, he's first. That's correct.
I'm not sure. It's probably quite tight between the rest, or even with Smith Rowe as well. I think I'd probably go. I think I'd probably put Jota second, Foden third. Who were the others? Sarr and Trossard. Trossard fourth, Sarr fifth.
Okay, and the only one you got right was Smith Rowe. So I think that actually kind of puts into perspective what I said about Foden as well, because Foden is last out of those 5 players. So
really? Wow, okay.
Yeah, so it's Smith Rowe with 57, Trossard with 51, Sarr with 48, Jota with 46, and Foden with 40.
Oh wow. Okay.
And I think what was that haul when Foden got? Did he get like 14 points? So he did get a big proportion of his returns in that one fixture.
Yeah, so, and I guess he missed like 4 games at the beginning of the season as well.
Yeah, he missed a few as well.
Yeah.
But still, I think a few people would have answered it in the same way as you. I think
based on hype, I probably got the hype order right. It was the actual point score order.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good way to put it. Right, I'm just going to give you one more while we're here. So we're going to go for strikers. So I'm going to give you Aubameyang, Timu Pukki, Chris Wood, Jimenez, and Saint Maximin.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty sure St. Maximin tops that list, based on his performances when Wilson's been out. So I'm going to put St. Maximin first.
Yeah, that is correct.
Cool. Who the others? Aubameyang, Wood,
Pukki and Jimenez.
I think I'd put Aubameyang next.
Tell you that's it. It's because we're not doing it for points. I'll tell you that's incorrect.
Oh, okay.
Just to put you on.
Jimenez, Pukki, or Wood. I guess Jimenez out of them then.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And then between Pukki or Wood, it's going to be close. Neither of them are done particularly well.
So you're just assuming Aubameyang's third, are you?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was going to put Aubameyang next.
Yeah, that is correct. Just trying to throw you off a bit.
Yeah, no, I definitely think Aubameyang's ahead of Pukki or Wood, otherwise we'd have a problem. Pukki or Wood. Obviously, Puki's had a couple of returns overall, mostly penalty based, I think. Wood, I think he does better than he actually does, and he gets like a goal maybe every kind of 5 or 6 games at the moment. So I think I'm going to go Pukki and then Wood.
Yeah, that is correct.
Cool.
Yeah, Aubameyang only had 1 more point than Pukki.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we've not scored a lot of goals, to be fair, and he's missed 2 penalties, I think, as well.
Yeah, I hope to say it brings him closer, because did he get -1 the other game? Pretty sure he did.
Last week, yeah.
So it was St. Maximin on 45, Jimenez on 43, Aubameyang on 38, Pukki on 37, and Wood on 32. So not too bad, but well, you did better on that one than on the midfielders, shall we say? You had your Foden bias, I'm saying that.
True. And I also think I think Sam makes me raise my game. So I was too casual about this one. With Sam here at the game's on, and I need to keep it up.
You have to concentrate and think about it. Yeah, cool. We'll move on from that, and we'll look at the fixtures coming up for this next game week. And well, I feel like we say Liverpool are involved in the biggest fixture every time, or it's always the most exciting one. And I'm sure you're probably going to agree with this, Charlie. You might not agree if we come back next week and it's turned out that Man United result. But I would say going into this week of fixtures, the biggest game would be Liverpool against Arsenal. Are you looking forward to it?
Looking forward might be too far. Very hesitantly. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm feeling about it. I think, yeah, it's going to be interesting just to see, because there's obviously been a big narrative about a big turnaround from Arsenal, but ultimately that has come as a result, or certainly in big part due to the fixtures being getting very nice for us. And the last sort of two big, like real big games of this level we've played, we've lost both of them, which was the Chelsea and Man City games. Which is another dig at Spurs because we beat them easily. With Liverpool, yeah, I mean, ultimately, if we're going to get anything out of this, the best Arsenal team's going to have to turn up. Whereas I don't think the same is the case for Liverpool. I think they can, not be great, and if Arsenal aren't at their best, then Liverpool will still win it. Particularly the fact is that Anfield is going to make a difference as well, I think. And again, it's difficult to say exactly how Arteta's going to approach it. I feel like of any game, this is going to be one where he really tries to sit in and hit them on the break. I seem to remember, I can't remember if it was last year, potentially in an FA Cup game where it might have been the quarterfinal or something. We beat them by playing really, really defensive, or it might have been 2 years ago, really defensive. Just allowing them to put balls in the box, but just being better in the air than they were, from open play at least. And I feel like that's maybe the route he's going to go down, particularly with our improvement in that area, with the likes of Tomiyasu and Gabriel being very good in the air. And I think our left side does worry me in terms of, obviously that's going to be where Salah and Trent are attacking. And despite how well we've done on that side, whether it's Nuno Tavares, the new left back, or Kieran Tierney, both of them are, I would say, better at attacking than defending. And I think that's going to leave a lot of gaps in behind on that side, which either of Salah or Trent can exploit. So ultimately, I'm expecting a Liverpool win. Like I say, I think Arteta will try and keep it tight. So, and that's probably, I think, is the best we can hope for. If it's like if we lose by one goal, maybe like a 2-1 or a 3-2 or something, then I think that's the best we can really hope for, which isn't a great thing. But ultimately, we're talking about arguably the best one or two teams, maybe three teams in the league. And I think you just need to kind of know your place in the league and know this isn't really the fight that we're gonna win over the course of the season, or this isn't the team our battle is with this season. So I think it's one of those where it's just, as long as we can put in a good performance that we can build off, that's all we can ask for.
Certain levels of recovery, obviously, trying to recover from your bad start of the season. And it's going to be interesting how you do in these more tougher games to see if it's just you've gone on a good run and you're going to go back to how it started the season. So it's kind of the period of the season where we're going to kind of find out a bit more about Arsenal, aren't we, and see if they've got what it takes to actually like challenge for top four, or if they're just going to fall away again. It's probably going to be a more interesting game in a few weeks when we've got another podcast derby against Man United, but we'll see. But I think very much you've said, it's kind of, you can't expect that you're going to pick anything up at Anfield. I think in your position now, and I think like you touched on as well, that right hand side. I think anyone's scared of that right hand side, let alone if you've got worries down that side. So it could be decent to watch, but I think exactly as you said, you're going to have to play sitting back and try and get them on the counter attack. But good luck to you, and we'll see. We'll report back. Hopefully, well, I'm not sure. Do we want to be saying next week it was the most exciting game, or would you rather us be like talking about 0-0? I don't know how you want it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think Yeah, hopefully it's a very dull draw. That'd be great.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to say it's high scoring, and I don't think it really works out well for any team going downfield. So, unless you like City, it's like a 2-2. I don't think many other people would get a result with a high scoring game, but we shall see. It'll be a decent game either way.
I guess the only other thing to add is this doubt over a few of the Liverpool players. Again, the problem being that, like I say, I think they're obviously we all know that their sort of most potent side is that right side, and that's where I think our weakness is defensively as well. So, and that's not where they've got their injuries. So, in theory, there's still the potential for them to do well regardless. But that does, I think it's what Henderson, Mane, Robertson all have doubts. Some of them confirmed, but that could play a little bit of a part in it and give you that smallest bit of confidence. But ultimately, it's still Liverpool with Salah, Trent, Jota, whoever else. It's yeah. Anything out of that game would be good for Arsenal.
I don't think many teams come play and get anything at Anfield, so everyone would agree with that one.
If we can not lose 5-0, it'd be great.
It's improvement. That's what we lost to City, wasn't it? 5-0. So.
Oh no, I was thinking about Man United against Liverpool, to be honest.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, I wasn't thinking about that one. I've tried to blank that one. Like, it's been a long international break. It's taken that time to recover. Well, yeah, I saw a lot of people celebrating the end of the international break. Then you just see people commenting underneath who are United fans saying, "Oh no, we've got to watch this awful football again." So we'll see how that one goes. Well, we briefly touch on Man United's game where they away to Watford, which I feel like if you can't be Watford, then it's funny. Like I think I've said it for the last few weeks as well that you kind of want the team to lose the fact to get rid of the manager. And I feel like if Ollie loses to Watford, then you've definitely got no excuse. And if the board keep him after that, then there's no coming back, really, is there? So they should be winning that, really. But you never know with United at the minute. So I don't think there's too much to add on that one because you'd expect United to win. So we have a look down the other fixtures. So I think, the lunchtime game on Saturday, I think could have been a good game, but I've seen, so it's Leicester against Chelsea. But I've seen that Tielemans is out for Leicester, which I think is a big blow for them. I can still see Leicester scoring in this game because, like I said, I'm not fully convinced by Chelsea defence. And you know what, Vardy does like a goal against a big team. So I see Chelsea winning that game, but I don't think it'll be as easy as they'll think. How would you see that game going, Charlie?
Yeah, I agree on the points you mentioned. I think, if I was going to have to make a prediction in terms of scoreline, I'd probably say 3-1 Chelsea. Leicester have been very inconsistent, and particularly in defence. And I didn't know about that Tielemans injury, but again, like you say, that's a big blow to them. Chelsea haven't been completely free flowing, but those wing backs just seem to be so good at getting in behind, and those tactics just seem to be so perfectly set up for those wing backs to be in completely free on the wing. So yeah, I can't really see any Leicester getting anything out of the game. Like you say, it wouldn't surprise me if Vardy gets something from it, which again is playing into my mind about FPL wise whether I keep Vardy. I'm not going to start him in that game, but they do have a better run coming up, Leicester. So, and this is one of those games where he does seem to like turning up for these big games. Particularly, they usually get some space against the bigger teams. But you could argue that because it's Chelsea in the system that they play, maybe they won't get as much space as they might do against some of the other bigger teams. But yeah, Chelsea win, definite for me, to be honest. And I'm quite happy going in with James because even if they don't keep a clean sheet, I would probably be expecting some kind of attacking return from either of the wing backs at Chelsea.
Yeah, I think at this point you're always looking. You think you'd look more for the attacking returns than the actual the clean sheet at this point with those two. Yep. It's crazy what they can do going forward. I feel like going back after the international break, we're getting thrown into football as well, which is perfect with 6 games kicking off at 3:00, which you don't see very often. That's quite a lot of games for 3:00. So I'm going to enjoy getting sat down listening, watching to those games at 3:00, everything going on in terms of FPL. And I feel like there's quite a few pretty even games around that 3:00 time. So you've got Villa, Brighton, Burnley, Palace, Newcastle, Brentford. I feel like you could on any day you could see either of those teams winning in those fixtures that could go either way. Some kind of interesting players within there as well. I feel like the big man you've been talking up the last few podcasts, or at least the last one, was a bit of Gallagher from Crystal Palace. Have you warmed any further to bringing him in to your team so far, Charlie?
Well, so because Saka's probably on his way out from my team, Gallagher seems a very obvious move. I think by far at that price, he seems the most obvious, the obvious transfer, and Palace's run is pretty good long term. So yes, he definitely is getting closer and closer to my team. It kind of comes down, I think, to what I do. Whether I go for like a Vardy out, and because I've got 2 free transfers, so I could kind of make a bigger move, or if I just wanted to again kind of play more safe, just go for Saka out and carry the other transfer over. But yeah, I do expect Palace to win that game, the form they've been in. That being said, that's the kind of situation where you wouldn't put it past a Sean Dyche team to kind of spoil the fun. And Palace have been on such a good run. You could just see a resolute Burnley side just kind of battering them, and in sort of physically, not in terms of actual scoreline, because I don't think they'll score a lot of goals. But yeah, ultimately, I would think Palace should win that, but who knows with the fixtures? And like you say, those kind of 3 or 4 games, it could be very even. Will be interesting just to see that Newcastle side under Howe, exactly what they're doing against the Brentford side that's kind of been lacking in a lot of form lately. That being said, I'm going in starting in Mbeumo, and this feels like it's if he's not going to score in this game, he probably will be making a move eventually out of my team. So yeah, will be interesting to see. I actually quite like the look of obviously the Sunday fixtures. I suppose we'll come on to those, because I think the TV people have picked the right games this weekend. I think all the 3:00 ones, barring the Man United game, you'd probably say will be quite a lot of goals in that. I think all the good games are the ones on TV, so it'll be good weekend of football.
I feel like you could make a slight argument for Wolves West Ham at the minute as well, with the way West Ham are playing. But again, I still think that'll be quite an even game. But quite like we've touched on, I think like all the games over kind of the whole weekend, you could see going either way. I'd maybe argue Everton at City is a bit different, but yeah, like you touched on, there's a few interesting options, and I feel like Burnley are a bit of a different beast when they're at home. If it was at Palace, I'd be going Palace every day of the week, but Burnley at home are a bit different. And as you mentioned with Mbeumo, I think it's exactly the same situation me with Ivan Toney. It's kind of last chance saloon, and he's probably the most obvious person. If I was going to bring Wilson in, I would get rid of Toney for. So I might pay quite a bit of attention to that and see which striker looks the more potent to stay in the team till the wild card. But yeah, like I said, it's going to be good for those 3:00 games. And so you've touched on looking forward to the Sunday game, so I'll let you start on them. Why are you looking forward to the Sunday game so much, Charlie?
Well, as a triple Man City owner in FPL, I feel like they should be putting Everton away quite comfortably, based on Everton's kind of lack of real defensive solidity. Obviously, they did get that 0-0, but again, we're talking about a Spurs side that haven't had any time to bed in with the new manager, and yeah, Man City are just a completely different animal, and I think they'll just tear Everton apart, to be honest. So I'm expecting a quite high scoring game in that one. Spurs Leeds is an interesting one, because I think on the face of it, that would scream lots of goals. The way Leeds play, and what we've seen from Spurs recently as well, as I mentioned in that Europa Conference game, it does feel like there should be a lot of goals. But actually, interestingly, I was reading a thread on Twitter analysing Conte's games in Serie A against teams that play a high press and man-to-man press, like Leeds do. And actually, they tended to be quite low-scoring games, just based on the way that Conte sets up his team and tries to effectively draw on the Leeds players in their own half and then hit them on the break. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how that plays out, whether they do actually just try and go man for man against Leeds, which I think they have, regardless of what they've done so far. They've got the quality to do, and as we've said quite a few times now, Leeds are basically just a one-man team at this point. I hope that's not being too disrespectful, but ultimately it's Rafinha or nothing for them. I think if it wasn't for Rafinha in these last couple of weeks, they'd be, verging on a relegation fight at this point. He just seems so crucial to them, and defensively they've really been struggling. So I think if Spurs really went for them, they'd actually get some joy out of it. So maybe Conte will see that and go for that. But based on some of his sort of past history, he this kind of game, he tends to just play a bit more counter-attack and sort of lower scoring, but be actually a lot more comfortable. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I think, regardless of the fact it is Spurs, and I'd prefer that they didn't do well, it is just going to be interesting to see how this sort of obviously world-class winner of a manager comes in and takes that squad, because there's a couple of elements to work with, but it's going to need some investment, particularly behind. Obviously, you've got Kane and so on, but anything behind that really could do with some upgrades. So I think all Spurs game from now on are going to be an interesting watch, just to see how Conte works with that team until the point that they can actually inject some money and some new players into it.
Just wanted to add to your points kind of on Leeds, because I was actually looking back at their stats and their results over the last 5 or 6 weeks, and obviously we see them as it's high scoring, kind of involved in these thrilling games like from last season. But a lot of it, it's probably more the fact that they're relying on Rafinha, so they've been a lot tighter at the back, trying to keep the game tight, and then obviously rely on that bit of magic from Rafinha. So looking back over the last 5 or 6 game weeks, all of their results have been won by 1 goal by either side, or it's been a draw. There's not been a clear winner either side, so I think that game will be quite tight and a bit cagey. So I think on paper, when you look at these fixtures, you think, you can attack them and get quite a lot of goals, but we've not necessarily seen that in the last few game weeks. So it'll be interesting to see if maybe when they get Bamford back, or we might see Spurs knock a few goals past them now and obviously disprove that fact. But at some point, you wonder if they're going to get back to that more expansive play. They understand with their injuries they can't do it as well. But at least there's no doubt that Rafinha will be back for this game. I saw that he's on his private jet. I don't know if you saw last night, he got a huge elbow in the face from Otamendi and was bleeding quite badly from his mouth. But that was just before half time. He came up for the second half. So he's on his jet and he's coming back, so we don't have to worry about that one that time. Unfortunately, Fred was on the same plane, which we're not going to comment about. And Antonio actually got a private jet from the chairman to get him back from Jamaica, so he should be fine and ready after scoring against the USA as well.
Yeah, he deserved it after that goal. That was something special from Antonio.
Yeah, it was more about the guy who fell over trying to put in the rebound after. I don't know if you saw the clip of that as well. that was how everyone else would finish it. Antonio just at world class, and then that's how everyone else would finish it. But yeah, as you've mentioned, on a triple city, I've only got 1 city, so I'm hoping it's more tight than that. Cancelo can get a hat-trick if we want, that's perfectly fine, but no one else is allowed to be involved. Foden can be dropped, it's fine by me. But I think that covers most of the fixtures, so I just wanted to touch on our teams. Obviously, we kind of discussed a bit of planning last time, but what are your current feelings about transfer plans, and what are you aiming to do this week currently, Charlie?
So I'm quite set in my team. I'm quite happy with most of it. I highlighted before, I kind of think the obvious transfers for me are Vardy and Saka, but even that being said, the Leicester fixtures do turn after this Chelsea game. So it's in kind of the back of my mind as to whether I want to try and keep Vardy and hold him for those games, because after Chelsea they've got Watford, Southampton, Villa, Newcastle, Tottenham, and I think there's goals in it for him in all those games. That being said, he is also 10.8 million, and it feels like that's a bit too much really to be kind of dragging through that in the hopes that he gets into some form. But then you can kind of say that about most of the forwards at the moment, like we've been saying. There's not really great options, and that's kind of partly what's making me double think about getting rid, because it's a case of who do I actually get rid for. There's no one really that I'm that keen on moving to. And I don't really, I think if I didn't already have a 4.5 million striker position kind of taken up, then maybe I'd think about that. But I don't really want to be going into December with two 4.5 million strikers because one, that's really inflexible, but also two, none of the players at that price are playing. So it's not great for bench options. So yeah, so really it's kind of a case between those two. I have two free transfers, so I have the potential to try and move for someone like Son if I really felt like I wanted to go for it. But it may well just be a boring move and just going sort of Saka to Gallagher potentially. Or maybe if I was feeling really adventurous, moving up to Ronaldo for Vardy. But I feel like again that's probably just a bit too soon. Obviously the Watford game's great, and I have no doubt if Ronaldo starts that he will score. But then it's I believe it's Chelsea and Arsenal in the following two fixtures for
Yeah, that's
United,
right.
and I wouldn't really want to be going into those two games with Ronaldo again because of the price he is playing in those two fixtures. It feels like you can get better value elsewhere. And also, as we've said, it kind of feels like there's been this move to sort of 4-5-1 or even 5-4-1, and I'm quite happy sticking with that. I've got Antonio. I don't feel like I necessarily need to move off him because, again, I've got the same dilemma of who would I actually move off for. You've got these sort of really cheap strikers who aren't being consistent. You've got the likes of Pookie or one of the Southampton strikers, or maybe moving up to a Jimenez or something like that. But none of those fill me with a lot of confidence about getting regular returns. So I'm quite happy just to carry on going forwards with either just Antonio or Antonio and Vardy. So yeah, again, I feel like I've talked a long way around to effectively just saying I'm not actually sure. I think it would just be Saka to Gallagher if I was going to nail myself down to a transfer right now.
Yeah, I think I was going to bring up that point about Vardy if you did. So you got in there first. That I see lots of people transferring Vardy out, but even if you're not convinced by him this week, I don't see why you would be selling him with that run afterwards. I'm even considering him bringing him next week because of that fixture run, especially the Watford at home. Obviously, you've got a bit of risk that he might get rotated with the other striking options, but I think it's still a decent option. He's not an immediate sell, so if I was in your situation, I would be probably doing Saka. I was just interested in that cheap striker you've got, obviously, in Davis, who, well, I say he doesn't play. I can see he's got 1 point last week, so it comes on for a few minutes. So, obviously, you said you're not convinced by the striking options. Have you got, going into December, you're just thinking of just leaving as a 4.5, or would you eventually put a million or two into that position so you've got cover over Christmas, or is it just like that's going to be a dead position for you?
I think it's probably going to be a dead position, but that's on the proviso that my other two bench positions are, genuine potential starters, which they are at the moment. They're not sort of bench backups like the likes of I don't know. Some people have Ben White or something like that, but I think at this point it's Saka and Vardy. It could potentially be Gallagher and Vardy, or it might be Livramento on the bench or whoever, who I think all have genuine chances at returns some weeks. I think in that position, I'd feel okay with keeping the 4.5 striker position there. If those positions were a bit weaker, then maybe I would look just to get that extra playing player. But I think because it is that third on my bench, then I'm not too worried. Like you say, there is the potential for some rotation, but I think because all the players in my team, you've either got players that are so crucial to their team that I don't think they'll be rotated, or I think again they're still valuable players to their team. That means that they would come off the bench anyway in those sort of December fixtures. So yeah, I think for now I'm happy with keeping that 4.5. And again, it comes down to who would I actually think to upgrade to. Around the cheap prices, I guess it would be the likes of Hwang, or it would be Pookie, or one of the Southampton strikers. But again, it's just going to be the same thing. There's the potential for rotation for them anyway. Maybe not with potentially the likes of Pookie. I guess he's probably more important than the rest of those strikers to their own respective teams. But how much am I actually expecting from someone like Pookie? I don't think I would necessarily justify the value of going with him over someone that gets maybe 1 point on the occasional game compared to Pookie, who might probably get 2 points in most of those games and maybe the occasional goal. So yeah, I think for now I'm happy with keeping the one striker as a non-playing player with still sort of strong bench options ahead of him.
I think I agree there because, like, if you're looking at last week, we've got Diaz and Antonio on the bench. It's not like the kind of lower value options that you've got on the bench to cover. So you've got like a solid, well, ignoring Foster, you've got like a solid 13, haven't you? There, well, you can say Foster's solid as well with his penalty save, but obviously can't play. Well, two goalkeeper formation could be a new one, but yeah, I quite like the strength you've got in that 13 of them. So I don't disagree with your thinking there. I think that's one of the points I need to be thinking about in the structure of the wild card, because how I've set up from the start of the seasons is to have a cheap midfielder, but I feel like there's a lot of value in the midfield now. So that very cheap striker isn't a bad option. Because when I've been doing a few drafts, not that much in detail, I've either been having a cheap midfielder or two cheap defenders, and then like the three who are always going to be playing, like your Cancelo, your Trent, and someone else. So I need to consider that when it comes to wildcard time. But yeah, I wouldn't be getting rid of Vardy, in my opinion. But I'd say if we kind of touched on Ronaldo. Ronaldo, I'd argue, outside of Salah, is probably one of the best captaincy options for this game week. So if someone has Ronaldo in their team now, I wouldn't be rushing him out for this week. You could do a quick switch Ronaldo to Vardy next week, which would work quite well as well. So just quickly touching on my team, I actually made my transfer quite early. I was pretty sold on Gallagher, I think, before we spoke on the last podcast, and we talked up Gallagher a bit more, and then Gallagher was transferred in. So I've already done my transfer of Havertz to Gallagher. Havertz hasn't fully impressed me, and there's the threat of Lukaku, Pulisic, Werner, everyone taking his place. So he was always a free fixture play for me. I think I made the transfer a bit earlier. I could have maybe held off and maybe gone for a Jota, but I'm happy to wait and watch Jota in that Arsenal game and then take it from there. And by doing that downgrade, I've got a lot of funds where I can have a bit of fun in these last few weeks before the wildcard to see where I'm going to go. And I only had one free transfer anyway, so that's what I've done that on. And as I mentioned, going forward, there's a few people on the watch list. Who did we mention before? We mentioned Jota. So I think next week is going to be the big transfer for me, because I'm going to have to decide between like Jota, Kane, or Vardy. I can really only go for one of them. So it's probably going to be a few dilemmas for me next week, but we'll get there. We'll decide between them. And like I said, at the minute I don't really have any benching issues because of how bad my bench is. But you never know. I'm keeping Semedo for those two fixtures. Watch Semedo get sent off against Norwich now, and it's just going to backfire terribly. But we shall see. So just last point, I slightly touched on it. Are we going anywhere but Salah for the captaincy this week, Charlie?
Yeah, I can't see it. I've already highlighted how I think our left-hand side is the weakest area, and obviously that's the area that Salah's going to operate. I guess the only slight doubt in that is the potential for Trent to be the beneficiary of that rather than Salah, and maybe actually it ends up being whoever's on the other side, whether it's Jota or Mane if he's fit, that benefits from the balls coming in from that side rather than the actual direct attacks. But yeah, it feels, even though it's against my own team, and even though we've been better than sort of previously, it feels, taking out everything else that's in the equation as well, which are still valid points about the fact that he's so highly owned, and he's going to be the highest captain player this week anyway. I still feel like he's probably the best captain pick anyway. Obviously, like you said, there's the potential Ronaldo if you do have him. But even so, it's been very hit and miss with Man United. Maybe not so much going forwards, but still, there's it's kind of chaos at United. So I think I'd much rather trust in a player that's been so consistent and so good this season, and continues to be. So yeah, I think Salah, no doubt, and then maybe Ronaldo if you had him. It feels like if you've got Ronaldo, you should be, because that kind of feels like, why wouldn't you if if you're bringing Ronaldo in or you've got Ronaldo, if you're not captaining him against Watford, then why have you got him really? But yeah, I mean, if you don't go Salah, I feel like you could drop off quite badly.
Seen that one before. Yeah, I'm very much in the same field, really. I'd be quite tempted by that Ronaldo shout if I had Ronaldo, but there's no legitimate reason that I'm going to be getting Ronaldo in the team. I've seen quite a few people considering Kane, which I'd be avoiding as well. Very similar to kind of what you said about United. We've not seen anything convincing from Spurs, so I feel it's very risky putting a captain on that kind of player when you can say he's got a form against San Marino, for example, but I'm pretty sure quite a lot of us would have form against San Marino. I think outside of that, I would actually be quite tempted if Salah's fixture, well, I was going to say it's a bit more difficult. I'm not talking Arsenal down there. I'd be quite tempted by Cancelo, I'm not going to lie. The form he's been in, and like you said, you'd expect quite a few goals for City. So, like, for my own team, I think Cancelo would be the only one I'd probably consider. But saying that, I'm not going to go, it's not going to be moving to him, so pretty locked on Salah unless we get some mystery illness or something before the deadline. So I think that covers everything for the preview going forward for this week, and as we said, we're very excited to actually get back to FPL, as I'm sure a lot of you are. Is there anything else that we've missed, Charlie, that you want to touch on?
No, all good. Yeah, just really looking forward to this intense period of game weeks, pretty much twice a week, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, fun from FPL. I'm not sure how fun it's going to be trying to get podcast recordings between all these game weeks, but we'll give it a go, guys. We can't promise there'll be one for every game week, especially when you get nearer to Christmas and it's very condensed, like your Boxing Day and between Christmas and New Year. But we'll give it a fair go and we'll do some kind of update throughout there and just keep an eye on the socials when we're doing podcasts. But for the next few weeks, I think except for that game week 14, or we might have to work something out, will be good for next week. So planning on weekly for now, and we'll work it out from there. So thank you, Charlie, and we'll call it for this one, and thank you everyone for listening.